What a move by Embiid.
You think of us. We are sports. 97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
The 76ers have a new head coach, and the Phillies continue a road trip, plus Eagles OTAs or, voluntary off-season activities, whatever you want to call it. The Eagles are doing stuff. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. Welcome back from the holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Thank you to everybody tuning in back here on a Tuesday. We were off yesterday, so glad to be back on board the show today. We're going to go pretty deep into the Nick Nurse being hired by the Sixers, kind of follow up what it means, and also what it means in light of the NBA Finals matchup that we're going to start seeing on Thursday night. Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer is going to join us in less than 20 minutes. Keith, we had him on last Thursday. I was filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash, and Keith wrote an article last week in the Inquirer about why the Sixers should hire Nick Nurse. So I want to have Keith back on to talk to him about, hey, Keith, now that Nick Nurse got hired, what is your take on the whole situation? Because the way this all developed for Nurse to be hired by the Sixers is actually pretty interesting. So we're going to get into all that coming up here on Game Night, 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle. You can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Plus, you could chime in at 609-403-0973. Joey D. Inventor already has chimed in on the messages. We'll get to his message in just a few minutes. But my opening take on the Nick Nurse situation is, when I saw the news come out on Saturday that Nick Nurse had pulled his name out of the Milwaukee Bucks job, and that's why they hired Griffin for the Milwaukee job, my first thought was, wow, Nurse is still in the running for the Sixers, because a guy like Nick Nurse, who's in that much of a demand, doesn't pull his name out of a premium job like Milwaukee unless he's eyeing another job, right? It's kind of like the idea of you have your final, your final choices for, like, let's say, a car. Let's say you're doing car shopping and you narrowed it down to 3, and then you say, all right, I'm not doing car B, so I'm now in the cars A and C, right? Or, if Mike Gill's listening, I'm sure the Bachelor and the Bachelorette, when they're having to hand out the flowers and all that stuff, and they're down to the final 5 and the final 2, and and Nick Nurse was doing the same thing. He was breaking it down. He was whittling down the options. And I immediately thought of the Sixers, because remember, Nick Nurse was one of the first people to interview for the Sixers head coach opening. And then the news has come out in the last 24 plus hours, basically, that Nick Nurse and Joel Embiid met. They had dinner together. And after that, both men basically gave the thumbs up. And now the Sixers organization is working with Nurse's representation. And so as a result, we went from Nurse being one of the most in-demand coaches. And I asked you guys on the Twitter poll last week at 973, knowing that the Bucks and Suns wanted this guy, how did you feel about it? And a 65% of you on the Twitter poll said, I want Nick Nurse ASAP. The rest of you said, finish the interview process. Well, you ended up with the guy anyway. So you guys can tell me how you feel at 609-403-0973. The DMs in the 973 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle. I'm so intrigued how this process played out, because according to reports, Nick Nurse is here because he wants to coach Embiid. The prospect of coaching Embiid was a big selling point for him. And it has to make you think, why not Giannis? Because Giannis is a lot more like Kawhi Leonard, right? The guy that he won a championship with. He didn't want the Suns job. Why not? Is Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, in that situation not appealing to you? And Nick Nurse basically said, I want the Sixers job. I want to coach Embiid. That is a huge statement for a guy like Nick Nurse, who has options. He could have been the coach anywhere. For him to turn around and say, you know what? I want to coach Embiid. I think it's an amazing credit to Joel. It's an amazing credit to the organization. And I think as a Sixers fans, you should be proud of the fact that this guy chose your team, your situation, your guy. I think the other part of it is, Brian Windhorst mentioned last week on First Take about how an organization's stability is probably going to matter to some of these guys. And the Suns have a brand new owner who ran Monty Williams out of town. Didn't like him, was the reports out there. Milwaukee, their ownership is a fluctuating disaster waiting to happen because the guy who hired Mike Budenholzer was part of a rotation of owners. So each owner takes a turn being the governor of the team and their operations. So the guy who fired Budenholzer was not the guy who hired him. And the guy who hired Budenholzer sold his stake in the team to Jimmy Haslam. And now Haslam is going to be the owner of the team. I believe I got to double check, but I think it's 2025 or 2026. So if you're a head coach who gets hired in 2023, are you worried you're going to be fired in 3 years? It's a weird situation up there. If you're a guy like Nick Nurse, did you really want to deal with that? So that brings you back to the Sixers. For all the Sixer fans' criticisms of Josh Harris, if nothing else, he is a professionally and financially stable owner. And that's a positive. It's a positive that you have an owner that is not part of a revolving door, or an owner that's not perceived as people asking, is he the next George Steinbrenner? Now, the big question with Nurse is, what does this mean for James Harden? Well, my perspective is, based on everything I've heard and read, that it looks like James Harden's not going to be back here next year. There's no reporting, no information out there that says that Harden will be back. And realistically, do you really want Harden back? Do you really need Harden back? If you're hiring a guy like Nick Nurse, this might be more about Maxey and Embiid than anything else. JJ Redick said this morning on First Take on ESPN. I thought that was very interesting. Take a listen.
Whoever got this job, here's the priority to me, beyond just maximizing Embiid like he's already been maximized to a degree. Can you elevate Tyrese Maxey? Can Nick Nurse, to me, I think Tyrese Maxey has another level to his game. I think he's a potential all-star, potential, third-team All-NBA type guard. I really believe that.
So do I.
If Nick Nurse can elevate Maxey the way that he elevated Siakam, the way that he elevated Fred VanVleet, that changes the ceiling and the conversation around the Philadelphia 76ers.
Okay.
It's always been about Embiid and Harden. I think it could be about Embiid and Maxey.
Maxey's 22 years old? It's not like you have a guy in Maxey who's old. It's not like you have a guy in Maxey who is already past his prime. No, you have a guy in Maxey who could be elevated. And I think all of us of reasonable mind would agree that Maxey has a higher ceiling than Fred VanVleet. And if Fred VanVleet was able to take that step with the Sixers, with the Raptors and Nick Nurse, then why can't Maxey take that next step with Nurse and the Sixers? It's something to think about. And you know what? If you get Max to take the next step, you don't really miss Harden. And frankly, you could argue that even though Harden helped you win 2 of those games versus the Celtics, he lost you 2 of those games too. Before we hit the break, get the text board in 609-403-0973. Your DMs in the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank. See how we'll be joined by Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer in just a few minutes. Joey D. in Ventnor chimes in. Says, Josh, I'm intrigued by the Nick Nurse hiring. Could be a good reset depending on the players coming in. Also, it was good to see you this weekend. Joey D. in Ventnor. Yes, Joey D. It was good to see you this weekend. I always enjoy chatting it up with you. You mentioned about who they're going to bring in, and Keith Pompey will spread more light on this than I can in just a few moments. But when you think about this roster, obviously the big key is Tobias Harris. What can Morey swing for him? And what do you have to include with Harris to get something of value? Remember, when the Sixers dumped Al Horford, they gave up a first-round pick. When the Sixers sent Ben Simmons in that package for Harden, they had to give up picks for that too. So Morey told the media that they have assets, they have opportunities, that there's things they can do. Well, this is put up or shut up time, Mr. Morey, because guess what? You have an obvious player in Tobias Harris in the final year of his contract who you could argue is not giving you the value that this team needs in terms of on-the-court production. I think Tobias is an incredible guy in the locker room. He's an amazing, if you ever watch those Matisse Thybulle vlogs when they were in the blog about how players like Matisse looked at Tobias. So he's a great guy in the locker room. He's important in the locker room, but he's not giving you that on-court production. So the question is, what can Morey do? I think that's going to really answer your question, Joey D. in Ventnor. All right, coming up next, Keith Pompey. He wrote last week in the Philadelphia Inquirer that Nick Nurse was the best man for this job. Well, we'll ask Keith coming up next. Now his thoughts after the Sixers listened to him and hired Nick Nurse. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle.
You haven't downloaded the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app? Well, go get it now to follow all the Philly sports teams at 97.3ESPN.com. Powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
What dealer has new Kias under 25 grand and only 2.9% financing?
Who is Matt Blatt Kia?
What dealer will pay off your trade, even if you owe thousands more than it's worth?
Who is Matt Blatt Kia?
Correct. Have a job clearing $350 per week? Matt Blatt Kia in Egg Harbor Township or Toms River wants to approve you. New 2023 Kia Forte or Soul, 0 down and just 2.9% financing for 48 months. Plus, we're overloaded with trades. Low mileage, one owner trades, many with remaining factory warranty, and they must go to make room for new Kias arriving daily. Just because you don't see your new Kia on the lot doesn't mean you can't be driving it home tomorrow with our exclusive 4-day love it or leave it return policy.
It's gotta be a Matt Blatt Kia.
With approved credit, not all will qualify. $27.78 per thousand finance. Go to mattblattkia.com for complete details or 888-505-6670. Price includes all costs to be paid by consumer, except for licensing, registration, and taxes. Expires 5/31/23. Matt Blatt Kia, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, and now on Route 37 in Toms River.
Hi, Robert Downey Jr. here. Did you know that over $10.3 billion was lost to online crime last year alone? Online crime is a huge problem. It affects everyone, and that's why I've partnered with Aura. Aura gives you the tools you need to stay safe online. Fraud and identity theft protection, a password manager, parental controls, and more. Sign up for a free 2-week trial today at aura.com/Robert.
Have you ever noticed that when the afternoon light hits your floors, you can see everything, including dust?
So much dust.
And that floor dust gets kicked up into the air, compromising the quality of air you and your family breathe.
Eesh.
Swiffer Heavy Duty Sweeper is the fast and easy way to clean your floors with ultra-thick pads that trap and lock dust before it gets in the air. Just a couple minutes a day.
And dust is gone.
Swiffer Heavy Duty Sweeper. proud partner of the American Lung Association.
Can I help? Who's next?
Tom's part-time barista is now a full-time actor.
Oh, you didn't hear. He got the part on Broadway. Yeah, great for him, bad for our finicky cold brew tap.
Now he needs a star understudy to fill his open role.
And he made the best grande triple shot with oat milk caramel.
Indeed can help him hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. We instantly connect you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Everything that you'd ever seen with Miranda Lambert on it, I have my finger on the pulse of what it is. Out of Wind, I've seen every article of clothing. I've spent hours and hours sending inspirations. I've sent clothes that I love and fabrics, and I'm involved in every single garment that you see. It's important to me that it is an extension of my music, and it's an extension of who I am. I always want it to stay as honest as my music. Idlewind at Boot Barn.
Ask Sherwin-Williams during the Memorial Day sale, May 26th through June 5th, and get 30% off paints and stains with prices starting at $31.14. That means 30% off our most popular color family, blue. Psychologists have found it to be soothing and relaxing, which makes it especially great for bedrooms and bathrooms. And of course, get 30% off all of our other colors. Shop the sale online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
With GMF financing, qualified buyers excludes Corvette.
At Bennett Chevrolet, we're selling new Chevys at real GM supplier employee prices and not 1 cent more. And you keep all the rebates. Not some. I said you keep all the rebates. Up to $8,000 right now during our Memorial Day super sale. Some dealers think they can imitate Bennett by giving you a discount, but they keep part or all the rebates. Bennett Chevy gives you both the real deal GM supplier employee price plus all the rebates. Up to $8,000 during our Memorial Day super sale. And there's available 1.9% financing. Looking for used? Bennett will pay you a minimum $10,000 for any clunker, junker, or whatever you can drag to our lot towards any pre-owned in stock. That's at least $10,000. We pay a lot more for good trades. And unlike other dealers, our sales commission. Gotta come experience the difference. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
We'll get to Paul in Ocean City as well as Dan EHC's text in just a bit. Keep coming in at 609-403-0973. Your DM in the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. Last week when I was filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Patch, I Keith Pompey, the Philadelphia Inquirer, on. He wrote he thought Nick Nurse was the man for the job. So I figured, well, you know what? Let's bring the prophet back, Keith Pompey, who basically said Nick Nurse should be the man for this job. And now Keith Pompey is back with us to talk about his thoughts on the Sixers actually hiring Nick Nurse here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Keith, welcome back. How's it feel to be a prophet?
I guess it feels good. I mean, I'm glad that they didn't hire someone else that I said, hey, don't hire this guy. Don't hire this guy.
So what is your initial reaction to how this ended up getting here? Because it was a weird series of events from Saturday through yesterday, from Nurse's name getting removed out of the Bucks job to apparently Nurse and Embiid having dinner to then the report of him getting the job. Like, this whole process is just like it's been a crazy whirlwind, it feels like.
Yeah. It's to me, it was one of those things where once it happened, like, about time. What took so long? I mean, I get it. I understand that, we talk about the Milwaukee Bucks job. It seems like, he got his buddy the gig there, right? Adrian Griffin. But the Phoenix Suns, he was a finalist. But to me, it was like, this is the perfect fit for both. And what I mean by that is, here you go, you have a coach a championship coach that they wanted, a coach that Daryl Morey is familiar with, and a coach that, is 1 year with a superstar, Kawhi Leonard, they won a championship. So I felt like for both people, and then, I listened to you, you talk about stability. So for him, this is a great opportunity for Nick Nurse, and he's a great coach and hire for the Sixers for both reasons. And I felt like this was a great marriage for both of them. So what took so long, in my opinion, to make it work, to make it happen.
Well, let me ask you that question. Do you think that it took as long because the Sixers wanted to finish their process, for lack of a better term, of interviewing people? Because from what I understand, they interviewed a few people before they came to this decision, right?
I think it took so long because Nick Nurse had to decide what he wanted to do. To be honest, yeah, you interviewed a lot of people. Of course, you interview people. That's a part of the process. But I always felt like Mike D'Antoni and Nick Nurse were probably the two guys that they would probably go after. And Mike D'Antoni from the aspect if James Harden came back. And Nick Nurse, let's face it, I mean, he won a championship in 2019, Coach of the Year 2020. And he also had a relationship with Daryl Morey. Like these other guys, you do have to do your due diligence and interview them. But, you got to a point where when you're talking to sources and sources say, hey, Nick Nurse is really pondering and thinking over things right now to see what's the best fit for him. That tells me that it was his job to lose, and he had to think it through.
So now that Nurse is here, what do you think that means for the Sixers moving forward? Because there's a lot of questions about, hey, Nurse played a certain style in Toronto, right? He had all these athletic wings, doing all kinds of different defenses. So what does that mean for Joel Embiid and the Sixers now that Nurse is here in your eyes?
I think that now it's like I'm not going to say it. Basically, I think it puts more pressure on Daryl Morey now to win the championship. Like you got the guy that you said you need, and do that. I think as far as Nick Nurse, it finally gives him since he had Kawhi Leonard, that superstar player, to be able to do what you want to do. I mean, I think a lot of people look at Nick Nurse and they say, but they want 41-41 last year. They lost in the play-in game. But I look at it as if, like, he took a team full of role players, turned two of them into all-stars, Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet, right? And then also you look at it and I say that now he finally has a guy that's going to be able to get the calls and get the benefit. The thing about Nick Nurse teams, they were like, what? They didn't get calls. He had a squad that, 41-41, but they were like amongst the team's worst, the worst in the league and 3-point shooting and field goal percentage overall. But yet and still he kept them competitive. So I think that for Joel Embiid is a bonus to have a coach like this, and for Nick Nurse is a bonus to have an all-star caliber player and or MVP player in Joel Embiid.
So with Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at Pompey on Sixers. Check out his latest on the hiring of Nick Nurse over at Inquirer.com. Keith, when you think about, the fact that he got this job with Embiid's blessing, do you think that vibes with what Morey said at the presser, saying that, hey, I'm not going to hire guys with my guys' permission, but of course they'll be part of the process because obviously the MVP is here?
You know what? I don't know. Like something. No offense to Daryl Morey. Much respect. But a lot of times when we listen to these pressers, like you got to take with some of the things they say with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to say that. I mean, the thing is, years ago, Ty Lue was a candidate, a finalist to get the job. Embiid didn't want to play for him. It came out, right? He wanted to play for Mike D'Antoni at the time. So what happens? Ty Lue doesn't get the job, right? So you know what I mean? So you can say what you want, but if you got a guy who's a star player nowadays and they want their guy and you don't hire their guy or you hire someone else, then people always say like, hey, they got to stick with it. They got to deal with it. But think of how many players recently, including Ben Simmons, who wanted to get traded and got out of here. So if you lose Embiid, you're losing your number one asset, right? So with that being said, I understand what Daryl Morey said, but believe me, these players have more power than you think they do.
And frankly, they probably should, considering the fact of, I mean, it's their careers on the line here, right? I mean, it's their legacies, it's their everything that's on the line with this stuff. Speaking of players, what do you think about the idea that Nick Nurse can elevate Tyrese Maxey? Do you think this is going to be, can Tyrese Maxey be a guy who takes a big step?
Yeah, I mean, I think he can, but also at the same time, I also think that, for Tyrese Maxey, I think they still need to go out there and get a point guard. Like if James Harden doesn't come back, he needs a point guard. A lot of people are under the belief that Tyrese Maxey is going to be able to be, be the initiator, run the show. You know what? Can he do it? He can do it. But is that the best job for him? No, it's not. So like I think like Tyrese Maxey is a combo guard. Yes, he handles the ball, but he's a scoring guard too. And I feel like Tyrese Maxey is better suited playing with a point guard who's going to get him the ball, set up opportunities for him. So yes, I think Nick Nurse is going to unleash him. But at the same time, my biggest concern is who's going to be running the one for Tyrese Maxey, who's going to be able to give him get him in great situations. Because as much as we talk about James Harden, and some people think that, let him go, let him go, let him go. I get that. But Maxey will be the first person to say that James set him up perfectly and got him the balls in perfect spots. Now, there were times where he could have got the ball more, but at the same time, Harden set him up a lot. So, I think that, yes, he's going to unleash him, but I also think that, we're fooling ourselves if we think that they don't need a point guard.
So that gets me to the other question for the offseason. Is Tobias Harris part of the ability to acquire maybe that other point guard to play next to Maxey and Embiid?
It depends on who you can get. The thing that scares me about Tobias, and something else, like, again, great show, I was listening to you. You were talking about Al Horford, how they gave up a draft pick to trade Al Horford, how they gave up a draft pick to make another trade. They don't have too many. They don't have a draft pick this year, and they can't trade a draft pick until 2029. So to me, that kind of like puts them a little bit behind the eight ball when it comes down to Tobias Harris. And then the thing about Tobias, a lot of teams know that you want to get rid of that salary, but you don't really have a lot of assets to help. So if you get rid of them, what are you actually getting back? You know what I mean? So that's the scary part right now. Like, what are you going to get back? And let's face it, the Sixers, they got Nick Nurse because Doc Rivers couldn't get them out of the second round, right?
Right.
So Nick Nurse's job is to at least get them to the Eastern Conference Final, if not win a championship. That's what they want. And I know that Tobias is coming off the books and all that other stuff, but if you can't get anything better than Tobias Harris that's going to help you, I don't know if I'm just willing to trade him for just to free up cap space that I'm not going to be able to get a lot of players for because we're so high over the cap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's and I was thinking the other day about this, Keith, about how, like, it wasn't that long ago, but years ago, the idea is, hey, I got a bad contract, you got a bad contract, let's just swap our bad contracts, right? Like I remember one of those trades was Quentin Richardson years ago. Like it was like he was on a bad contract. I think he got traded to the Bulls or whatever it was. And like, in today's NBA, there's fewer of those bad contracts. And now with this first apron, second apron thing coming, it's looking more like teams are maybe less likely to just, absorb fat contracts because they don't want to pay that extra money.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They don't want to pay that extra money, and that's part of the thing. And so like you look at it. So let's just say if you have a team, and I don't think it will happen like with the Spurs because I think they're trying to go on to the next level. But a team like the Spurs who have the most cap space, right, out there, or the Houston Rockets, right? The Houston Rockets have a lot of cap space, but they want to get James, right? But a team like that, Houston might be good, but a team like that or the Spurs, you give up Tobias. Like, do they have anybody that, you think that team is willing to give up the absorb cap space that you're willing to take back in. So that's the problem. Like, before it was like OKC, like it was you would dump somebody in there. But even with that, like if a team wants to absorb cap space, so a lot of times sometimes instances, they may not have to give that much back. Just because of that. So, that's the thing. Like, what are you going to get from those teams? Because typically they're teams who are tanking, teams who are like rebuilding, and they just want to get that salary, get to the cap floor. And what they're going to do is they're going to flip them no matter what, because they're going to try to trade them somewhere else at the trade deadline. So that's just a question on what are you going to get for Tobias Harris?
Yeah, I still don't understand why the Lakers were able to dump Westbrook's contract on Utah this past year. I mean, I feel like that must have been some side deal by Pelinka and Danny Ainge. That's a conversation for another day. Back to the Sixers. Keith Pompey, the Philadelphia Inquirer, joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Keith, a couple more before I let you go. I want to ask you, we talked about Tobias Harris, Maxey, Embiid, but what about the rest of this roster? What are some of the other guys that you're keeping an eye on? Because, like I said, Nurse is known for playing a certain style. So are certain guys maybe more of a focus than others, you think, this offseason?
I think like when we talk about Nurse is known for playing a certain style, a guy who I would be interested in seeing what happens is Jalen McDaniels, right? And the reason with him is because he's long, he's athletic, he can play multiple positions. And when you look at Nick Nurse's teams, they typically have long, athletic, unheralded players who get a niche on his squad. So that's a guy in free agency that I'm really intrigued to see what they're going to do, right? You look at another guy who I expect them to pick up though is Paul Reed, another guy that can do that. The thing about Paul Reed, we look at him and we all say center, 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 but we forget that he was a power forward in college and he was a 3 in high school, like the same height, but he's played the 3, he played the 4 in college, and now he's a center. So he's another guy that fits in perfectly to what Nick Nurse is trying to do. And so there are guys that you would think that the Sixers would like to bring back because they have this length, So those are two guys that when I look at it in free agency, because let's face it, Sixers don't have a lot of money, but those are two guys who they have their bird rights to, two guys that aren't going to demand a lot of money, you don't think, but two guys who would fit in perfectly for what Nick Nurse is trying to do here.
Before I let you go, I got to ask you, because I know you're a basketball guy too, your thoughts on the NBA Finals, Heat Nuggets.
I think the Nuggets are going to beat them. I do. I think that, who knows? It could go 6 games. It could. But I think the Nuggets are going to win this series. I look at it and you see Bam is athletic, for a big, but I don't see anybody capable of covering Nikola Jokic. And then you look at the other pieces that they have on that team. I think that team is a dominant squad. And I think, beforehand, I always thought the Sixers and the Boston Celtics were the 2 best teams. But now I'm looking at it, and Denver was vastly underrated, even though they had the best record in the West. But they were underrated because they stepped their game up in the postseason. And I really think that Denver will win the finals.
Yeah, especially Jamal Murray. I mean, he's just been a force of nature, it feels like. I mean, because people, really quick, Keith, you know how it is. People love to obsess over like the main guy, right? Oh, Jokic. But to me, it's like Jokic ain't nothing if his sidekick wasn't Jamal Murray. You know what I mean? Like, that guy has been so clutch at times. Like, he has taken the pressure off of Jokic in some of these games.
True, but also think that they work well. They're a match made in heaven, so to speak. For each other. Because you look at it, they don't really have a point guard. Jamal Murray is not a point. He's a combo. But when you have Jokic, he enables all these guys to get into their spots and they don't have to worry about having not having a point guard because they run everything from the big man. So I think that they work well with each other. But you are right. Murray, is a great sidekick. And it's funny because, yes, they made it to the championship. And the last time Murray was healthy was when they made it to the Western Conference Finals in the bubble. So it's kind of like one of those things where, he is a major part of their success. A lot of people don't want to give him credit for that, but he is. He's a major part of their success.
He's Keith Pompey. Give him a follow on Twitter at Pompey on Sixers. Check out his latest on Nick Nurse getting the job with the Sixers over at Inquirer.com. Keith, appreciate you jumping on. And next time you have an inclination, maybe you should go throw a couple bucks like the lottery or something, okay?
Yeah, I need to, right? I definitely need to.
Take care of yourself, my friend.
All right, my man. Peace.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle. We got texts coming in. I see George in Summers Point, as I mentioned, Paul in Ocean City, Dan in EHT, Shaner in EHT. All you guys will get you guys next to the Power Hour, known as Game Night, on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle.
The NBA Finals on ESPN Radio.
The Denver Nuggets have finally done it.
The Miami Heat become just the second 8th seed ever to make the NBA Finals.
Storming out of the conference finals, the Denver Nuggets and Miami Heat head to an epic showdown to the NBA Finals. Game 1 of the Nuggets and Heat, presented by Indeed. Coverage begins Thursday at 7:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
Listen to the NBA Finals exclusively on 97.3 ESPN.
Hey, beach lovers, if you won the $239 million Powerball jackpot, you could buy a new vacation home in every Jersey Shore town. Anything can happen in Jersey.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply or apply stopped, opt out. Go to nomoredraftywindows.com for full offer details.
Attention all homeowners. Do you know when to replace your windows? Feeling too hot or cold? It's time to replace. Fog between the glass. Time to replace. Spending too much on expensive energy that literally goes out the window? It's definitely time to replace. If you've put off replacing windows in your home because it's too expensive, here's great news. You can now get a free in-home window consultation and free price quote from Renewal by Andersen, the company with the most 5-star reviews among leading full-service window replacement companies. And right now, you can save $359 off every window and $887 off every door. Just text PLACE to 200-300 for your free consultation on top-quality affordable windows or patio doors for $0 down, 0 payments, and 0 interest for a year. That's right. You don't pay a dime for an entire year. Plus, save $359 off every window and $887 off every door. But hurry, these big dollar savings end this month. Text PLACE to 200-300 right now. Text the word PLACE to 200-300. Don't wait. Text PLACE to 200-300.
0 down, 0% financing, and $7,000 off MSRP on every clearly marked Matt Blatt Nissan in stock.
Oh yeah, it's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
Stuck in a loan or lease? AJ the Trade Man can get you released, even if you owe thousands more than it's worth, with 0 down and 0% financing on every Nissan Rogue for 36 months, even 0% for 60 months, plus $7,000 off MSRP on every Nissan Titan in stock. And don't forget, AJ the Trade Man will get you more for your trade, so you can drive a brand new Nissan. And of course, the Matt Blatt Nissan Peace of Mind 4-day love it or leave it return policy only at MattBlattNissan.com. On approved Tier 1 credit through NEMAC. Negative equity will be refinanced into new vehicle plus tax tag and $589 doc fee. Offers can't be combined. Call 877-289-6670 or go to MattBlattNissan.com for complete details. Offer ends 6/3/2023. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
Wendy's $3 breakfast deal is a bacon or sausage egg croissant plus small seasoned potatoes for $3. It's the breakfast that don't miss. So if you did miss Wendy's breakfast, don't imagine. Fresh cracked eggs, sizzling sausage, crispy bacon, and block out those hot, buttery, flaky croissants. Croissants don't really make a sound, but if they did, for a breakfast that don't miss, Wendy's is that breakfast. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's $3 breakfast deal.
Limited time only. Participating U.S. Wendy's. Select a request $3 breakfast deal to obtain discount. Not valid for a la carte combo orders.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them.
If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-444-9336. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance to buy $1 million of affordable term life for you. All you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-444-9336. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-444-9336. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too. Call 800-444-9336. 800-444-9336.
We got Verizon 5G home internet. It's from Verizon. Safe choice, right?
Well, some things that look great end up being not so great.
Like the time you bought a shrimp roll from a gas station.
Or when you bought that used sports car.
What about when we got Billy that drum set?
The point is, Verizon 5G home internet sounded great,
but turned out to be something else. And we deserve fast, reliable internet. We deserve Xfinity.
It's time for better internet. Switch to Xfinity. Learn more at xfinity.com/Verizon 5G Facts. Now through June 21st, get started with 200 megabit per second Xfinity internet with Wi-Fi equipment included. It's all just $25 a month for 2 years with no annual contract. You can save up to $600 in your first 2 years over Verizon. Go to xfinity.com/Verizon 5G Facts, call 1-800-XFINITY, or visit a store today. Requires paperless billing and autopay with stored bank account. Restrictions apply. Taxes and fees extra. After promo, regular internet rates apply. Actual speeds vary. Compares Xfinity Connect More to Verizon 5G home plan.
When you order food for work on EasyCater.com, we've got your back. Real humans are here to help with your order every step of the way, making sure everything goes right, even behind the scenes without you knowing, confirming and double confirming with the restaurant that everything is on track. If there's a problem,
thanks for calling EasyCater.
call us anytime, day or night, and we'll answer in seconds. We're right here with 100,000 restaurants, working hard to ensure the food arrives on time and is ordered. Order 24/7 at EasyCater.com.
Hey, Jay, can you finish that induction range installation tomorrow?
Orders have really amped up at Nate's Electric.
We need to finish installing it first in Maine. Did we hear back from the grocery chain?
It's no shock he needs electricians, like yesterday.
Smart fridge. Everybody wants one of those these days.
Indeed can help him hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. We instantly connect you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Our locally owned and operated small businesses are the heartbeat of our community, and the 97.3 ESPN South Jersey Industry Aces stand out as leaders in their fields, like Broadley's HVAC and Plumbing, a family-owned plumbing and HVAC company that has been serving Cape May and Atlantic County since 1911. And men, let Tomorrow's Wellness Center in Northfield help you rise to the occasion. For more details, visit tomorrowswellnesscenter.com. Support one of these fantastic industry aces today.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
6:44 on a Tuesday night. Thanks again to Keith Pompey for joining the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. Time to hear from you guys. Stay out there. Bunch of messages coming in. Let's get you all in before we run out the hour. 609-403-0973. That is the text board. You also can DM the show. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle. Paul in Ocean City chimes says, Josh, I really like the Nick Nurse hire. He's very innovative with X's and O's. He saw the true potential with the team and feels that that's the main reason why he decided on Phillies. Paul from Ocean City. Paul, you are right. All the reporting out there is that, Nurse wanted to coach Embiid. Embiid gave his blessing, and that's how we ended up here. So that is a major part of it. I do think that, you mentioned the innovative part with Nurse. One of the things with Nurse was he had to be innovative because as time went on with the Raptors, and I'm going to say this as professionally as possible, the Raptors turned out to be a Fugazi organization. All right. This hero worship of Masai Ujiri, their executive up there, has turned out to be basically a fraudulent thing, because this is an organization that couldn't win a championship before they got Kawhi Leonard. They got Kawhi Leonard. They went all in. Nick Nurse got them to the promised land, and they never replaced Kawhi Leonard. They never replaced Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka's production, and instead they handed Nurse a roster with a bunch of nice players and only 2 all-star players on the entire team. Outside of Van Vliet and Pascal Siakam, the Raptors are a pretty average to below average roster. So you're asking a coach in the NBA to win without a superstar player. And Nurse was handed something that he was never going to be successful with. Never, ever, ever, ever. There was no way Nick Nurse was going to have a deep playoff run with a team without a superstar caliber player. Jimmy Butler has proven to you that you can win a championship with you can get to a championship, I should say, with a superstar and all-star level player, as long as the rest of the team around those guys make it work. And so Nurse had to be very innovative, because he was having to ask guys like OG Anunoby and Chris Bouchard and, these rando dudes. I mean, Scotty Barnes might turn into a nice all-star player, but I don't think he's a superstar player. You're asking this guy he has to be innovative. He has to pull out every trick, every tool of the trade to get it done. And probably what's appealing to Nurse is the fact that I get to coach a team with a legitimate superstar again. You know what I mean? So that has to be part of the reason why he's here as well. Good stuff from Paul in Ocean City. George Summers Point chimes in and says, Josh, I think that's great the Sixers picked Nick Nurse. I find it a bonus that it means that Harden will likely not be back. I think Nurse took the challenge of working with Embiid because he was instrumental in helping to make Siakam the star that he is now. My question for you is there any scenario in the future that Siakam may find his way to the Sixers? Thanks as always, George in Summers Point. A couple things, George. Number one, the Siakam part first. I would love to see the Sixers find a way to get Siakam for this upcoming season, because I think that Siakam would be an amazing upgrade over Tobias Harris. But as Keith Pompey said earlier, it's hard to know exactly what the Sixers can get for a guy like Tobias Harris when his value is probably the lowest it's ever been. So unless there's some crazy miracle that happens, I don't foresee Siakam being a Sixer at the start of next season. In terms of the future for Siakam, he is going to be a free agent after this year. I totally could see a scenario where with the cap space next year, Siakam comes to Philadelphia. I don't think that's a crazy idea. I know Siakam and Embiid are very friendly. I know that they are guys who get along, not just because of their African heritage, but because they apparently have similar interests as well. So apparently they're both big Premier League fans from the last thing I read. So I could totally see Siakam being a Sixer in the future. I don't know if it'll be next year, though. I would like to see it next year. I know that the money works with Tobias Harris and Pascal Siakam having almost the same exact money on their contract. Back to the part you were talking about earlier, you said that the challenge for Nurse to work for Embiid because he was helped make Siakam into a star. I do think that Nurse sees this as an opportunity. I think Nurse sees the opportunity to do something that nobody else has, which is get Embiid to maximize his potential. Listen, Doc Rivers deserves credit for helping Embiid become MVP Embiid. But I think Embiid also became MVP because he took it on himself to do that. Joel has said himself in interviews that after he became a father, it changed his perspective on the world. It changed how he looked at himself. It changed how he looked at his career, the city of Philadelphia, the team, everything. So, Nurse has the opportunity to say, all right, Joel Embiid is currently in his prime. can I get the best out of Joel Embiid anyone's ever seen? And some people may say, we've already seen the best of Embiid. And maybe Nick Nurse says, no, you haven't. Watch me go to work. The big question is that part of the reason why he got Siakam to be a star, as you say, Jordan Summers' point, is because Siakam became one of the league leaders in minutes per game. So is Joel Embiid going to become a guy who's less injury prone to be able to absorb playing 70 games a year? Siakam led the NBA last year in minutes per game played. Now, only played 71 games. So if you get Embiid for 6 more games, let's say, just to throw a number out there, you get 71 games out of Joel Embiid. Are you getting a better version of Joel Embiid? It's an interesting question. Good stuff from George and Summers Point. Dan and EHC chimes in. I'm very intrigued by what JJ Redick said. I feel that with Harden out, Maxey can get more touches and maybe the team can be better without Harden. I don't know exactly what more touches means for Maxey. Keith Pompey said that Maxey is not a natural point guard and that you need a natural ball handler to handle this situation. I think Maxey has a huge ceiling. I think Maxey could be a perennial all-star in this league. I think his potential is much higher than we initially give him credit for. I think the problem is getting Maxey more touches going to benefit everyone, or is it just going to benefit him? It's like, for example, and I want to, put this in the right context. So when you look at what happened with Tracy McGrady, right? Tracy McGrady, when he left Vince Carter and he was able to become his own star, he put up great stats in Orlando, but without Grant Hill, they didn't win anything. So then he goes to Houston, and he has to learn how to become a more well-rounded player. And so he learns that it's less about him getting his opportunities than him being a part of a winning team. And a big reason why they never won a championship down in Houston with McGrady was because basically not first, both McGrady and Yao Ming couldn't stay healthy simultaneously. When McGrady was at his peak years in Houston from 2004 to I think he got traded in 2010. If I remember correctly, he never played consistently a certain number of games. I know that he played 78 games one year, but then he had 48 and then 71 another year, and then he played 62. So McGrady wasn't always healthy, and it was a huge part of why they didn't have their success. But he learned while in Houston to be more of a well-rounded player. That's why he would average between 5 and 6 assists a game, even though he was a heavy volume scorer. So can Maxey learn to be a guy who takes the touches, but also learns how to distribute a little more than he is now? Shaner and EHT chimes in at 609-403-0973. Says, Josh, are you worried about the Phillies yet, or is it still early? He says, I am concerned. Turner needs to turn on pitches and get his defense turned around, and then this team will turn around. Shaner and EHT. I think for the exact reason you said is why I'm not worried about the Phillies yet. I'm annoyed. I'm frustrated. I'm just peeved at times with the Phillies because it feels like the Phillies are just one of those teams that should be playing way better than they are. And then I go out there and watch them get slaughtered by the Braves on Sunday Night Baseball. They won 2 straight games, and they should have won the first game. They should have won 3 out of 4, but they got the split. I got to accept they got something positive out of Atlanta. Now they're playing the Mets. they got to get 2 out of 3 against the Mets, in my opinion. They got to win 2 out of 3 in this series. And it's not crazy to anticipate that, because if they get 2 out of 3, and they got the series against the Nats, they get 2 out of 3 there, guess what? That's 4 out of 6. You're above 500 again. So if they can't get the majority of these games against the Mets and the Nats, then I'm concerned. You know what I'm really concerned about, Shane or NHD? I'm concerned about Ranger Suarez. I don't know if that guy's got it anymore. Something's wrong with him. I don't know if it's mechanics. I don't know if it's mental. That's who I'm worried about right now. Shout out to Jeff in Ocean City. Says, go Phillies, beat the Mets. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night. Catch you tomorrow.
Hey, South Jersey, this is Billy Schwein. Tune into The Locker Room every Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon on 97.3 ESPN. Each weekend in The Locker Room, you will get passionate sports talk from a fan's perspective, along with interviews with some of the biggest names in sports. That's every Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon in The Locker Room with me, Billy Schwein, on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, because nothing could be finer than talking sports with the Schweiner.